a Times Union podcast.
Previously on Long Buried. We learned more about Karen Angellilo Ramsey's life growing up in Westchester County, New York.
She was a good person. I mean, she had a big heart.
And about how her life began to change after marrying John Ramsey.
They didn't have a great relationship. I know Karen was a very good mother, but I don't think her plan, I think when she planned her life, I don't think she included children.
We also met Bob Beckerick, the Ramseys' upstairs neighbor. After 44 years, he still remembers hearing a blood-curdling scream in the middle of the night.
I remember seeing John a couple of days later throwing out all of his wife's motorcycle stuff in the dumpster.
And we picked up the police investigation into Karen's murder, where John Ramsey was starting to appear more suspicious in the eyes of lead investigator Joseph Morrissey.
He asked him what was going on, and he had said that John had told him that Karen left and took the baby.
But we haven't spent much time talking about John Ramsey yet. So that's what we're going to do in this episode. I'm Phillip Pantuso. This is Long Buried, an investigative podcast from the Times Union. This is episode 5, Secrets. In June 2024, after police had identified the remains as Karen Angellilo Ramsey, a striking detail emerged. Karen Ramsey wasn't John's first wife. He'd been married before.
There was a rumor that, she was missing.
And some early news reports, citing only anonymous local law enforcement sources, said that John Ramsey's first wife had also vanished under mysterious circumstances. It's hard enough to wrap your mind around the fact that one of John Ramsey's wives disappeared. But two? Really? Turns out this wasn't true. John Ramsey did have a first wife, but she did not vanish mysteriously. As best I can tell, this bit of information came from a miscommunication between New York State Police and the Putnam County Sheriff's Office, and it was first spread by a hyper-local news site that apparently didn't confirm that information with any other sources.
The thing is that we just found out he had a first wife and we couldn't locate her, that's all it was.
Eventually, State Police investigator Joe Morrissey did locate John Ramsey's first wife. So did I. Hi, I'm trying to reach Zoe Ann.
Speaking.
And she couldn't have been more surprised that the man she married almost 55 years ago would later be wrapped up in the murder case of his second wife.
There couldn't have been anybody more ordinary than him. I'm just flummoxed that he's causing any interest in anything.
Zoe Ann Billigmeyer was in junior high school in College Park, Maryland, when she met John Ramsey. The year was 1965. At least, that's when Zoe Ann thinks it was. She would have been 13 years old. John was 16.
He was the best friend of one of my girlfriend's boyfriends.
At first, there were no sparks between these teenagers. In fact, John didn't make much of an impression at all.
Well, it was just, people in the same place at the same time. He was with his buddy, and his buddy came to see his girlfriend, and it was as simple as that.
What did you think of him?
Oh, gosh, I don't know. I'd never had a boyfriend, so I didn't know what to think about anything at that time.
I don't get the impression Zoe Ann had thought much about John in a long time. At least, not until the police and a nosy reporter came calling about the murder of the woman he married after her.
The only time I ever think about him is when the detective called and when you called. There's nothing to think about.
But of course, it wasn't always that way. In high school, Zoe Ann began to grow more fond of John Ramsey. It's not hard to see why. John cut the figure of a caring, good-looking young man. In photos from this era, he has a strong jawline, close-cropped curly brown hair, and a wry smile that revealed dimples on both sides of a clean-shaven face. The kind, soft eyes from the photos on his obituary are recognizable in a 1967 High Point High School yearbook portrait, and in photos of John and Zoe Ann hanging out in the early 70s. He also had some pretty sweet rides.
He loved working on cars. He was a gearhead. He was definitely a gearhead.
That's Steve Ramsey, John's younger brother.
His first car was a 61 Impala. I don't know how many transmissions he put in that thing. But, and he would blow the transmission up and then, just put in another one.
I reached Steve by phone at his house in the Shenandoah Mountains of Virginia. What was your relationship with John like when you guys were growing up?
Yeah, he was 6 years older than me. It'd be like the typical thing where he would go out with his friends and I would want to go and say, no, you're just a little baby. So, you can't, come with us to do whatever they were going to do. But, we lived in the same house together. And I can tell you that there was never any kind of animosity or, in other words, we got along just fine.
John Ramsey had a pretty typical suburban American 1960s teenage life, according to his brother. He had friends and girlfriends. He was studious and hardworking, and he never really got into trouble.
There were never any kind of signs of any kind of underlying problems. Never got suspended from school or expelled. The cops never showed up at the door escorting him. You know what I'm saying? There was never anything where he got into fights or into any kind of trouble.
But like many American teenagers in the 1960s, John Ramsey's life changed after he turned 18, and it was due to forces well outside his control.
He tried going to Prince George's Community College and I guess was trying to get a draft deferment, but that didn't work out for him, and he wound up and got drafted and wound up going to Vietnam.
When John Ramsey was drafted by the U.S. Army in 1968, America was mired in the Vietnam War, and it was going very badly. Earlier that year, the Tet Offensive had decisively turned public opinion against the war for good. There were more than 500,000 U.S. service members in Southeast Asia, many on their second or third tour of duty. But it would be another 7 years before the fall of Saigon and America's exit from the region.
Was he proud to go? Did he feel patriotic? Was he scared?
I don't think he really wanted to go, but it just, in the end, it wasn't working out with him. And I guess he thought that, well, there's nothing I can really do to fight this, so I'm just going to go, kind of stoic. Like, oh, well, here we go.
After getting drafted, John did his basic training at Fort Bragg in North Carolina with the 82nd Airborne, a division of the U.S. Army that specializes in parachute assault. Then he went on to an advanced individual training school in Georgia. While there, he got a special delivery from his parents and brother.
He had a 68 Camaro, and we drove that down there and gave that to him, and then we flew back.
Then John was deployed to the front lines.
What's your sense of what his experience in Vietnam was like? Did he talk about it much? Did he see combat?
Oh, he definitely saw combat. That's a fact. He was a sniper.
But did he talk about what that was like for him?
No, he never really talked about that. It wasn't something that he ever brought out or was like bragging about, but that he was there. I mean, I saw a picture of him that he sent back where he was actually sitting there. He had his sniper rifle on his lap, which was looked like an M16 to me, with like a silencer that was about as long as the weapon itself, and it had a starlight scope on it. That's all I know. He never really told any stories about what he was doing with it or what he did over there. I mean, I never sat down and talked with him. He just never brought that up.
I asked the same question about John's time in Vietnam to Zoe Ann Billickmeyer.
Did he ever talk about his experience over there?
No.
But it does seem like John talked about his experience, or at least some aspects of it, with a few people.
I got to know John pretty well.
Mm-hmm.
Every once in a while, he'd talk about his Vietnam adventures.
That's Chris West, who was part of a dirt bike riding crew with Karen, John, their friend Angellilo Carvalho, and a few other folks. Chris still lives in the Hudson Valley. I spoke with him back when I first began reporting on this case. We sat in his garage with the door closed, so the audio is a little echoey.
He didn't talk about, causing damage to people, killing people. Although I knew that he had a weapon that had a night scope.
Okay.
So he had a price on his head. The Viet Cong put a price on his head, or the North Vietnamese put a price on his head. I guess he was a sniper. Dangerous thing. So he had a lot of danger in his life.
Did he ever actually kill anybody?
Well, he must have. He had the night scope.
Yeah.
He told me once that a group of Viet Cong would come into a village that they had set up an ambush on. And the leader of the group going into the village always wore a white T-shirt.
Okay.
So he knew that was the bad guys.
Yeah.
And that was as much as I knew. He never told me about pulling a trigger or anything like that.
I've seen a few photos of John from this time, including what I believe is the one Steve mentioned. In that photo, John is standing tall in the jungle, looking directly at the camera with a smirk on his face. He's cradling a high-powered rifle with a mean-looking scope. He's dressed in army green cargo pants and an army green t-shirt, and there's an army green bucket hat atop his head. John also sent a photo from the front lines to Zoe Ann, dated December 1970. In this one, he's wearing a helmet and holding a rifle in one hand, and in the other, a field telephone up to his ear. One of his troopmates is crouching in the grass, invisible except for the peace sign he's holding up to the camera. In these photos, John Ramsey was 21 years old, but he looks like a lost boy. In total, John spent a little more than 2 years in the Army, eventually rising to the rank of sergeant. Steve told me that John saved his pay so that when he got back stateside, he could treat himself to a brand new Mach 1 Mustang. Steve remembers the first time he rode in it.
This is one thing I remember. This happened like in an afternoon one day. I'm like riding around with him, and he told me to reach up and change the radio station. I said, okay. So I reached up and he just put his foot into this thing, and it was like it threw you back in your seat. There was no way you could bring your hand up to the radio to do anything with it because we were going so fast, so quick. And he would just laugh and say, well, I guess you don't need to change that. That's like one little incident that I always think about because he was like kind of snickering when he was doing it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
John got out of the Army in early 1971. Back in College Park, Maryland, he picked up his old life. He and Zoe Ann started dating again and eventually moved to Greenbelt, a suburb of Washington, D.C. Steve remembers hanging out with the couple at a cabin the Ramseys' parents built near Shenandoah National Park, where John and Steve had gone camping as boys.
I went down there with him and Zoe Ann a couple times where we would go out and go canoeing on the Shenandoah River and stuff.
And that first summer John was back,
We got married 7/1/71. That was easy to remember.
he was 22 years old. She was about to turn 19. The ceremony was at Zoe Ann's mom's house. Zoe Ann's mom and her mom's boyfriend helped the young couple pay for the wedding. It wasn't anything fancy, she told me.
It was like a garden party.
In a photo from the wedding that she shared with me, Zoe Ann is wearing an understated sleeveless dress with a veil. She has wavy strawberry blonde hair, and her narrow face is split wide by a toothy smile. She's several inches shorter than John, who is wearing a striped suit and a boutonniere, that familiar wry smile on his face. They look happy. But to hear Zoe Ann tell it, this was a union born more of circumstance than affection.
Why did you want to marry him?
Because he was there. My parents were divorced. My mom and I were just barely getting by in any way we could. And I mean, she had a job, but we had no money, so I had to work and make money through high school for anything that I needed and to help out with my siblings a little bit. I mean, it was just, life.
What was married life like with him?
Boring. Except when we went out motorcycle riding, it was just simply boring.
We'll be right back.
In July of 1908, America was transfixed by the murder of a young woman in upstate New York.
Either Hazel came down here alive or dead. We don't know.
Oh.
I think she was alive.
She was found floating in a country pond, her death shrouded in mystery, her killer unknown. Was she murdered by a spurned lover? Was she leading a secret double life outside of her station as a governess to the wealthy residents of Troy, New York? Did she know too many secrets?
She was obviously trying to create a better life for herself, and she knew how to maneuver to make it work for her, and it worked until it didn't.
In this new limited series podcast from the Times Union, we'll go back in time to an era of wealth and prosperity, of rampant political corruption, and of secrets and lies in upstate New York. We'll unravel the mystery of the life and death of one young woman, and why her story still resonates more than a century later.
'Tis the last rose of summer left blooming alone.
Listen to The Girl in the Pond at timesunion.com or wherever you get your podcasts.
You're listening to Long Buried. About 2 years after John Ramsey and Zoe Ann Billingmeyer got married, John got a work opportunity that would change the course of both of their lives. He had been working as a salesman for the Erie Insurance Group when a coworker recommended him for a job in upstate New York.
I don't really know why he decided to take a job up there. I mean, working in the D.C. area was probably more busy than Poughkeepsie.
John and Zoe Ann didn't move to Poughkeepsie. They moved to South Nyack, a hamlet in the lower Hudson Valley that sits right on the river, at the western terminus of what was then called the Tappan Zee Bridge. Today, that's been replaced by a new span, the Governor Mario M. Cuomo Bridge. It's about 25 miles north of Midtown Manhattan.
I never had anything to do. And I was in a strange place. I'd lived in the same place my whole life, and then we moved up there. I just didn't know what to do with myself.
Life in New York widened cracks in John and Zoe Ann's relationship that had been there from the start. Zoe Ann didn't have a job. She didn't have her own means of transportation. She felt stuck.
Rather than taking me grocery shopping to buy food and make meals, he always brought home something from McDonald's or something.
What kind of expectations did you have, and what was not being met?
He didn't have any, how do I put it, passion, if you know what I mean.
In a handwritten note Zoe Ann sent me with the photos of her and John, she included a numbered list of things she thought I should know about John. Number 4 was, quote, "My major issue was he had no interest in sex or intimacy, so I finally gave up." Zoe Ann also wrote that a major disappointment for John was that he fell ill before a test for the Army Rangers, a highly trained branch of the Army's elite special operations forces. I couldn't find out anything more about that. Zoe Ann also wrote that her and John's hobby was riding trails on their Yamaha Enduro off-road motorcycles.
And we used to go up into the Bear Mountains and ride our dirt bikes. We meet some peculiar people up there, like inbred, live off the land type people. and you just need to get out of there.
And she wrote that she never had any fear of John or saw him display anger. In 1974, about a year after moving to New York, Zoe Ann knew that she needed a change.
He just didn't seem like he was interested in anything but, well, his job, I guess. I don't know. He never struck me as being enlightened by anything.
Zoe Ann began scraping together money so that she could move back to Maryland. Her first step was getting a car.
I remember it was a Volkswagen Beetle, lime green with black trim. I was coming back home to Maryland, so everything that I had that would fit in the car, I came home, and that was the end of it.
How did he take it?
I don't remember that we had any words about it, other than this is what I'm doing, okay.
Do you remember?
I mean, he was totally disinterested in our life.
Two of the photos Zoe Ann sent me showed John Ramsey standing with what must have been his car when the couple lived in South Nyack. He's wearing bell-bottom jeans and a loose-fitting button-up shirt, and he's looking straight at the photographer, his soon-to-be ex-wife. On the back of the photos, Zoe Ann had written, "My hubby, September 15th, 1974. My last day home." Zoe Ann only saw John one other time. It was the following Christmas, about 15 months after she'd moved back home, when John was in Maryland to visit his family.
And I noticed he had on a jacket that I had never seen before, a nice one, an expensive one, or it looked expensive to me. But I didn't ask him about it. I just assumed somebody bought it for him. And then he left and went to see his parents. And that was the last time I saw him.
By that point, Christmas 1975, John Ramsey was with someone else. In fact, it was a woman he'd met at the job that had brought him and Zoe Ann to New York. That job was at the Fireman's Fund Insurance Company. And that woman was a young clerk a few years out of high school named Karen Angellilo. I don't know if Karen and Zoe Ann overlapped in John's love life, but the timing is conspicuous. Zoe Ann left New York on September 15th, 1974. Patricia Racino Sanzo, Karen and John's former coworker, we heard from her in episode 3, remembers that they started dating sometime in 1974. That's what Karen's best friend, Carol Wheeler, remembers too. And Steve Ramsey, John's brother, remembers meeting Karen exactly once, right around this time.
I believe he was married to Karen at the point I went up. It was in January 1975. I went up and we went on a skiing trip to Massachusetts together. It was a kind of an interesting thing. We were just hanging out. I think Karen did get kind of upset with him a little bit because he was, I guess, hanging out with me. Because, you know, we hadn't been together for a few years. And so he's teaching me to ski. And I got the distinct idea that she was not real happy with that.
I'm also not exactly sure when Karen and John got married. In New York, you can only get a copy of a marriage certificate if you're one of the spouses or you have a court order. But I do know that they first lived together in a rented apartment in Peekskill, about 25 miles up the Hudson from South Nyack, before they bought the Holly Stream Court condo in October 1977. As you might recall from episode 3, I found the deed of sale for that purchase after a lot of digging. About 2.5 years later, well, you know by now what happened to Karen.
What did he ever tell you about Karen? Like, both in terms of like what their relationship was like and then what happened to her?
The only thing that he directly had said to me, and I heard him say it a couple times, is that she was just tired of being married and being a wife and a mother and just wanted to leave. And I got that same message from my parents. So that's the message up until this happened a couple years ago when we found out that she had been murdered, that was what we thought, that she had just said, you know what, I'm done with this, and left. And that's the way we all kind of accepted it.
After Karen was gone, it didn't take long for John to move on again.
So John had called and he said, you want to get together for some coffee? He said, I'm going to be in the area. And I was like, yeah, sure.
We already know there was his brief dalliance with Jeannie White. But John and Jeannie didn't last long.
He said, in fact, I can't see you anymore. And I said, okay. I said, did I do something? And he said, no. He said, you know Elaine. And I'm like, our neighbor Elaine? And he said, yeah. And he said, I'm in love with her.
Their neighbor, a woman named Elaine Calvano. You might remember that name. We mentioned it briefly in episode 2. John Ramsey's obituary says, quote, on October 10th, 1981, in Mayapack, he married Elaine Calvano Ramsey, who survives at home. Jeannie says John broke up with her for Elaine in November 1979. The timing of this breakup is important. You might recall that police believe Karen Ramsey went missing sometime in the spring of 1980.
If I didn't see John after November, and he was with Elaine, for all intents and purposes, he was with Elaine then. So they were definitely together when she went missing. Yeah.
Elaine Calvano Ramsey is an important person to the rest of this story. She would also become a focus of state police's investigation into Karen's murder.
We saw that Karen had been missing since probably May of 1980 and that he marries Elaine in 1981. So, our initial thoughts were that's a fairly quick timeline and that, she may not necessarily be involved, but if anybody knows something, it's probably Elaine.
In the summer of 2024, police investigator Joe Morrissey interviewed Elaine for the first time.
She did have knowledge of the investigation at this point simply because we found out that the day that we contacted Jen that she was actually bringing Jen to the airport. So she already kind of knew what was going on to an extent. So we sat down with her. We didn't really tell her it was Karen at first. I just wanted to gauge her a little bit, Eventually we did let her know that we had identified Karen. We just did the best we could to get information from her at that point. And besides the fact that it was a little emotional, which I at the time thought was fairly reasonable, she seemed to give us information. Some of it didn't seem to quite line up.
Morrissey hesitated before he added this. He had no reason to believe that what Elaine told him wasn't true. At least, at first. In the late 1970s, Elaine Calvano was married to a man named Ronald Bailey. Like Karen and John and Jeannie and Ed, Elaine and Ronald lived at Holly Stream Court. And like the other two couples, that's where their marriage fell apart. Sometime in 1979, Ronald Bailey moved out of the Holly Stream Court condo. Elaine told police that this was when she left as well.
She said that she had moved out of the condos in 1979 and that she really didn't get involved with John until, she said, about fall of 1980. And, by that time, Karen was out of the picture and she didn't ask a lot of questions.
Wait a minute. The timeline isn't adding up here. It's not clear exactly when John and Elaine got involved, but something was clearly happening between them by November 1979. That's when John told Jeannie in his breakup call that he was in love with Elaine. Remember, Karen and John had agreed to separate by that point, according to Jeannie. Karen vanished a few months later, in early 1980. Tracking Elaine's whereabouts in 1979 and 1980 is difficult because, unlike Karen and John and Jeannie and Ed, who bought their condos, Elaine and Ronald were renters at Holly Stream Court, so their names aren't in the property records. Elaine's timeline wasn't lining up with what both Ronald and Jeannie were saying. Morrissey realized why when he interviewed Ronald Bailey.
I asked him who took his place in the apartment when he left, and he said, no, Elaine stayed. I moved out, but Elaine stayed there, I think, until 1980 or 1981. And keep in mind, Elaine had initially told us she moved out in 1979.
In all, the police interviewed Elaine 5 times over several months. And what she initially told them about the condo and John, well, it wasn't the only thing she said that wasn't quite adding up.
Elaine was very up and down. Again, this is not an easy situation to be in, so I will give her a little leeway. But in the beginning, she would make statements like, I want to believe in my heart that John didn't do this, but he probably did it. She did admit that, there were some marital problems and that there were some times where Karen had threatened to leave him and take the baby.
At this point in the investigation, John was becoming an actual suspect in Karen Ramsey's murder. The only suspect. We don't know what Elaine really feels about this. I reached out to her for this podcast, but she declined to speak to me. But 2 people who did agree to be interviewed, and who knew John well, have trouble reconciling their understanding of him with the fact that police suspected him in the killing. John's first wife, Zoe Ann.
I just can't imagine, from my knowledge of him, that he had anything to do with it.
And John's brother, Steve.
As much as I can't bring myself to believe that my brother would have done that, but how can you put it? It's not like I just can't imagine him doing that. And it could be just a massive coincidence of all the other things that fall into place that make him look like a suspect.
Even Joe Morrissey can sympathize to a point.
Nobody was really coming forward. But the more we dug and the more stones we unturned and the more people we found that didn't have any personal connection to him per se, they may have knew him, but they weren't like his close friend. We got a little bit of a better picture, at least, of what his life was like at that time and what his relationship might have been like with Karen. There were definitely a lot of things going on with the man, for sure. Everybody has secrets for the most part in their life, especially if you keep living. But yeah, it's still something that even me doesn't even know John. It is a difficult concept to wrap your head around because he wasn't out there causing problems his entire life.
On September 28, 1981, John Ramsey sold the Holly Stream Court condo that he'd purchased 4 years earlier with Karen. I found the record of this sale, but when I opened it on my computer, my mouth dropped open. Because beneath John's signature, in loopy cursive, was the name Karen Ramsey. If Karen Ramsey disappeared in 1980, why is her signature on a notarized real estate document dated late 1981?
There was a point in her interviews where she did make inquiries about statute of limitations on forgery, but still stated she didn't do it.
That's next time on Long Buried. Long Buried is a Times Union podcast. This series was reported and written by me, Phillip Pantuso. It was produced and edited by Jessica Marshall. Editorial direction and fact-checking by Erica Smith and Casey Seiler. Special thanks to George Ruiz for design. Our web editors are Daniel Roberts and Kat Simon. Our theme music was composed and performed by Martin D. Fowler, with additional music by Cyrus Farah, Kromborg, Jackson Cole, and Rob McAllister via Getty Images. To see photos of John Ramsey, Elaine Ramsey, and Zoe Ann Billigmeyer, visit timesunion.com/longburied. If you have questions about the case or want to share any information you may have about it, email us at podcast@timesunion.com.